All right, see, for the record, it's July 12th, 2022, 9 a.m. This is the collective bargaining negotiations between Pasco Hernando State College and United Faculty of Florida. Gary, I sent you an email yesterday of a pay proposal from the college. And we've been working on that since our last meeting. Everything seems to take a little longer than we anticipate. Apologize for that, but it's a lot
I
of.
appreciate you getting it to us and allowing us to look at it before the meeting, because we do have some questions from it, and I think that can move the process a little faster since we had a chance to look at it.
Yeah, and I did receive, for the record, I did receive proposal from the union on office hours, but what I figured we could do is pull up the pay proposal from the college here. I'm going to ask Brian Horn to walk us through it a little bit more, as he's much more knowledgeable and articulate as to this information. And then as you guys have questions, whether during his presentation or afterwards, you can certainly pose those and we can go from there. Brian, you want to kind of walk through the spreadsheet and what we're proposing here for the next academic?
Can everybody see the sheet up?
Yes.
All right. This is the same basic, there's three pages I'll go through. This is the original salary schedule we showed you last time. So again, it shows what the current salary schedule is, what you guys requested, and what we had proposed back to you. Again, nothing has changed since the last meeting. Again, we did talk about eliminating the masters plus 15. So everything here stays the same as what we presented last time. The other spreadsheet we gave you here was a more detailed spreadsheet of every employee sorted by the grades. And then we also had to include all the vacant positions, because we got to fund those an appropriate level also. And it had all the calculations in the columns. But what I also did was include a calculation form. So basically you could come in here and put anybody's employee ID, and it would populate the information from that other chart. So hopefully it was a little more self-explanatory of how the calculation was being done. So it's kind of, one part is we already know this part. You had the wage that you had in 21-22, then we bargained and agreed to give everybody the 5.5%. So we know, the person's current wage would be the $48,042. So what we did is then we looked at, okay, if we're moving the salary grades up, let's, try and figure out a calculation starting all over again for every employee. So you basically go to the grade they're in. The new base grade for F, a master's plus 30 is 49,000. So then we did look at, okay, how many years experience did they have when they were hired in? This individual did not have any. The grade range that from the original salary schedule, for that grade was 2%, which we're saying the same credit, 2% for up to 8 years. So again, they didn't have a value in here, so that was 0. Then we looked at how many years they actually worked at the college. And so they had 13 years here times a factor of 0.75 per year. What we also had is a column we called compression adjustment. Again, because this number is a little bit lower than what the amount is for the years of credit up to the 8 years. If somebody had the same amount of like years of experience, if you had 13 years, you were coming in from outside and you got 8 of those years at 2% plus the additional years at the 0.75, you coming in from the outside would be making a higher rate than in a person internally. So that's why we want to make sure and go back in and say that wasn't the case, that any individual, if maybe as a simpler example, if I started at Hillsborough and I was there for 8 years, and Darrell Clark started at Pasco Hernando, and now he's been here 8 years. When I get hired and I decide I'm going to come to Pasco and get hired and I get 8 years credit, I shouldn't be making more than Darrell, who's been here for 8 years at the college. So that's what the compression factor is trying to correct and make sure that nobody internally is paid less than the person coming from the outside. And again, as I'll go to the chart in a minute showing all the employees, this doesn't relate to everybody. There's just certain positions where they were in that situation based on this calculation. So basically what you're trying to do is say, okay, start at the new grade, give credit for the 8 years, up to 8 years at the rate, plus then give credit for the experience here at the college. Then if there was an issue with compression, we adjusted that and say, what should your wage actually be based on that? And the wage is actually 58,835. So then what we do is we compare that to what the actual wage is with the 5.5% that you got previously. And whatever the difference is what the actual increase is. So if I go to the chart here, I mean, it's got every individual and it's showing really the same thing. It's showing each of them how many years experience you have. Is this too small? Can you guys see this? Do I need to zoom it up more?
I could see it fine, Brian.
All right. So each person going across showing what they made originally, the 5.5%. So again, where they're starting at. Then again, showing, okay, minimum of the grade F1 would go up to 50 grand. Any years of experience, example, person has 8. Okay, you'd add 50 grand plus the 10 grand. Plus then these individuals at 29, 26 years experience times the 0.75. So you come up with a value of what their salary should be based on the new minimum grade, the years of experience, and where it's at. Now, if their current salary is higher than that, then there's no increase. In these other examples here, there's actually increase happening because when you do the calculation, it's less than what they're currently making. In addition, there's some positions here where you've got individuals who, again, if somebody's been here a certain amount of years and getting a certain amount of credit, or has been outside so many years and coming in credit, we're trying to do compression to make sure the internal person is making at least the same amount the person's coming from the outside. Hopefully you can follow that logic. Because like example here, you got 2 people. This person came in with 8 years, has 2 years at the college. This person came in no credit, has 10 years at the college. In order to make it right, I had to actually do a compression of 4,600 to make sure the person, they both have 10 years total experience inside and outside. I had to actually provide a compression of 4,600 to make sure the internal person who came in with no years experience but still has the same 10 years of experience actually makes the same amount of money. Otherwise, they would be making less internally. So that's kind of where I tried to go through the compression thing and make sure people were made whole. And again, then the other columns again are just showing what the increase in, what the new salary would be, what the percentage increase is for this period here, and then shows what the increase is with the original 5.5% plus the current increase to show what the increase is, is been combined with the 5.5 plus this adjustment we're doing here. Again, you can, any person in here within the Excel spreadsheet, you can go in and type in anybody employee ID, and it'll populate this information that's coming straight out of this chart here. Just, makes it easier when you're looking at one individual to see exactly, can do an example. Just drop the person's ID in there, basically, then it shows what's being calculated. So it's a little more clear than trying to look at the spreadsheet line by line. But again, the spreadsheet is sorted by grades individual people are in, basically by the number of years experience total, and then basically which ties to the kind of the salary working down. So for each grade, again, we show the current grade. So the only ones really, affected under our proposal is the ones here that are masters plus 15 would actually go to a master's category. So I don't know if you had any questions on that. Again, this is the same similar logic we used when we redid staff. We evaluated the same way to what the current salary schedule is. In the staff's case, we only looked at the number of years experience they had in that specific level of a position to give them credit for that. And we did the same thing. Then we compared when we added those factors together and said, where are they at currently? And if they're above that, they didn't get any additional increase. If they were below that, then they got an increase to that amount that was calculated as the minimum they should make.
Were there any questions on the proposed salary?
Oh, I have quite a few questions, actually, Brian.
All right.
And I don't know who can address all these, but this morning we had a meeting and a number of questions came up from the faculty. And so if you would bear with me for a few minutes and let me answer these questions. What advantages is your method over calculating raises just using a salary schedule? Because frankly, your schedule here is confusing. We had math and business people that were confused by it. So we propose a very simple salary schedule. You plug the numbers in, boom, there was compression in it. And I do appreciate, and the faculty do appreciate the effort administration is doing to compress the salaries. We do appreciate that. But why do we choose to do this cumbersome flow chart here versus just a very simple salary schedule?
Well, remember, you guys proposed a salary schedule that I then give you credit for, like the equivalent of the years of credit for that we give for up to the 8 years of hire. And if I do that, I've got to come up with $2.5 million. I don't have $2.5 million.
If I can jump in, Brian, you with the spreadsheet we sent you, you can adjust the starting salaries and the percent for each step, and then it calculates the total cost. So if you didn't want to start with $50,000 for a bachelor's degree, you could go down from there, and then it would give you the cost, which would be less than $2.5 million. That was a starting point. And
But again, the challenge is you're trying to make the minimum salary attractive to try and bring people in. And that's always kind of been the issue. People saying the entry rates are not high enough. But the minute, you keep pushing the entry rates up higher, then you got to equate the people who've been here for years. And then that's where everything starts to grow fast. One other option is you come in and you say, okay, well, I don't put the levels as high. Or potentially, I reduce the percentage down for up to 8 years credit. I don't, those are a couple options, but the problem is it compounds, because when we try and get more competitive to market on the entry level rate, that forces us to drive up all the existing salaries we have to be equitable. Otherwise, people coming in would be passing up people who've been here for years. And with the schedule, if we get into a schedule, then it comes back to the old debate of, then you guys are anticipating based on that schedule that we can actually honor that over the next couple of years and know what we're going to have as money to pay out, and we don't. We have no clue what we're going to get in the next couple of years. We could hit the dry spell again, where we talked about before, where we're lucky if we get enough money to cover insurance and a pension increase. So we don't want to create expectations of, building a table, in this, kind of matches a table in a little bit of way, because when you look at people in the grade and the number of years experience they have, I think in almost all the cases, I was equating to the people, example here, if you can see it, total 17 years of experience, 3 people in this grade. So they all make the same amount of money, 53,878, 53,878. So I made sure with the compression that they basically equal the same thing. So it's a little bit of using that concept of making sure that everybody with that amount of years experience in that grade is at the same pay.
Yeah, and it seems to me that the differences in the approach is that what we've done is we're taking the salaries as they exist now and trying to make adjustments to provide some increase while also addressing the compression component. Whereas the union's approach is to kind of take everything from square one, using a salary schedule or whatnot, and build it out as if the existing stuff didn't exist, which, is one approach to do it, but that has its own issues. And I think if you look at taking that with realistic budget, it's going to be an unrealistic plan. Yeah, you can cut down the starting salary, but if the result of that is it cuts down to $30,000, nobody's going to agree with that. So what we're trying to do is take the money we have with the existing salary we have and provide an increase, but at the same time address some of the issues like compression. Is it perfect? Of course not, but it's a step towards that direction and trying to make sure it's an equitable plan while also trying to make sure that bargaining unit members, for the most part, see an increase. And as Brian said, we're trying to make sure that people who have been here at the college for a period of time don't end up lower than folks who came in from the outside with similar comparable experience, just from a different area.
Caitlin, did you want to follow up at all, or are you okay with that response?
That's fine.
Okay. All right, my second question, and correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I understand, staff received a minimum of 4% pay raise last year, and now they've been given a 5% raise, which compounds to 9.2 over the 2-year period. If you look at what you proposed here, half of our faculty are going to get less than the 9.2% compounded raise over 2 years. And there are 30 faculty that would get no raise at all this year. Now, I understand the idea that you're trying to compress and you're trying to get people equal, but I don't know that it's fair not to give 30 people something.
You got to remember too, I think your model that you provided, I think had almost 30 people you weren't giving a raise either. Which is what I questioned to begin with a little bit. And, no matter how if I worked the numbers under the original model you sent me and gave the amount of credit that's in the schedule for up to 8 years, and then even chopped that in half for every year beyond that, it still ended up with basically, I think it was 20 or 30 faculty not getting an increase at all.
Okay, I personally, I just feel that's wrong. I mean, you may be correct in analyzing what our data said, but I personally feel it's wrong. But how do you address that half the faculty are getting under the percentage of raise that the staff would have gotten over a 2-year period?
Well, again, the original pool put in for, or the amount we paid faculty on the front end was 5.5%, where we paid staff 4%. And then a lot of the additional 5 in this go round. So we're really working with 10.5%, but we're trying to, also make sure we set the salary schedule competitive for bringing new people in. And a lot of the challenge with that too is the faculty are the only ones who get up to a certain amount of credit for 8 years, where staff doesn't get that. So that creates additional costs beyond the entry rate of the scale when we hire new people. So if we would have only gave you a 4% like we did staff the first time around, I would have had about 1.5% more money to work with to actually do a better job at what we're trying to do here. But the fact that we threw it right away at the salaries, and it made it a challenge because you have so much history of people being here so many years, and some getting raises, some getting the progression of moving up scales. And even when we made moving up scales not permanent and we, as non-recurring, the faculty were still getting about half of that amount as an increase. So all those things compounding over the years make it difficult to try and in 1 year trying to really right the ship all the way through. And we were trying to do the best we can to right the ship and make it equitable to everybody in that situation. I mean, you can say, yeah, a little concerned people aren't getting a raise, but then they already did get the 5.5% raise. So they did receive a raise.
That was for last year, though. It was retroactive for last year. It wasn't for the coming year.
Mhm.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, if Darrell or, Stan or anybody wants to jump in on that, they can also.
No, I agree, Ryan. I mean, Gary, to that point, some of the challenges that made this a bit difficult as we walk through the process. We're looking at, the over the years, some of our faculty members getting earned degrees added to base, longevity's been added to base before that process came to a close. Then after that, then you're looking at the 5.5% increase that was added last year. And one of the challenges with that is that applied across the board to everyone. So including individuals who started mid-year, we had a small contingent of faculty members that started in November, and then we had another group that started in January, and that applied across the board. So now those same individuals, to tackle the challenges that were, at least that I've heard from faculty members regarding individuals being hired in at a greater rate, that 5.5% didn't help to tackle that particular challenge. So that added to the burden. So we were trying to just find a way to balance all of those things out. And then obviously, in addition to that, the faculty are the only ones that have their, in addition to getting earned degree, they have earned degree built into the classification plan. So, you go up another scale based on an earned degree as well. So those are the things that kind of made it a challenge to try to balance this all out when you take it in its totality. And, the goal here, obviously as I stated before, we all agree across the board that we need to do something to improve the rate for our faculty members. And that starts with the classification plan. But then in addition to that, for our existing faculty members, how can we improve that as well? Improve pay, maintain our competitive edge in the market, et cetera. And that's where the challenges lie, trying to balance all of that out. So it wasn't easy, obviously, and I'm pretty sure on your guys' side of the house, and putting the proposal together wasn't easy either. But we're just trying to balance all that out, and still, and working with Brian, trying to make sure that it falls in line with what he has. We can't, if we don't have it, we don't have it. So I was trying to make sure that we fit that model as well. So at least that's the challenges that on our end, when we went through this whole exercise that we're trying to tackle, it made it a bit difficult where we couldn't hit okay, yes, we can solve this problem, we can solve that problem across the board. Is more or less trying to find that middle ground, because the problem exists unless we blow the whole thing up and start from scratch and then just say, okay, and I got some ideas, but I don't think that they're, it will be a strong proposal. And I don't know if that, I couldn't even tell you what the outcome would be, but I have ideas based on things that I've researched to see how other models for faculty members are aligned. But I also didn't want to produce something that was so radical that, it's like a non-starter across the board. I mean, it might even be a non-starter on our end because we have to build that into the system. So.
And we can appreciate the constraints you all have, and I know there's a budget constraint. But I do have to ask these questions from the faculty. One of the things that we looked at in your minimum maximum salary, and we were looking at the bachelor's degree particularly, if we're not incorrect, there are 80 steps between the minimum and the maximum for the bachelor's degree. And we calculated out that if you were to give on an average of a year a 1% increase, it would take 36 years for a person to get from the minimum to the maximum. in that salary range. That's longer than a lot of people's career here. Can we say something to that?
Okay, remember, remember if you started at 45, you could still get 12% above the base. From there, so you can get up to 8 years experience at 1.5 or 12%. Thinking any salary schedule, I don't know if you can see the tab I have here, like the column Q and R. Again, and these are kind of the different ratios of like top to bottom. You know, the top to the bottom is 1.8 times the amount, 1 times 8 point amount. Again, we made this the range a little bit larger for the PhD level, but I mean, Darrell could probably speak that a little bit more. Those are fairly custom practices of the ranges that you set. Even on the administrative side, there's ranges that you set that people potentially over 20 years want to hit also, depending on, you know, if you only gave 0 raises or 1% raise for years. But if, you know, you had years that you're giving 3% raises reoccurring, you potentially could hit the top fairly quick.
Yeah, but that's a iffy, you know, budget year to budget year. It potentially could be you're getting less than 1%. There were years that we got no raise. And so I do know that we've made up a little bit for that, but there was a good spell that we didn't get any raises. So
I think over the last 10 years, the number shows like 1.7. Over 10 years, you've given out 1.7% on average. Over 15 years, 2% is what the average has been reoccurring. So yeah, I mean, it's not large. You get, you know, in this one year we gave 6%. That was kind of making up for the year we didn't. So it was almost 3 in each of the years. And, you know, we haven't seen huge increases since back in the day when we really used to get a lot of money from the state, as well as when we were allowed to increase tuition.
Brian, could you send me that table? I didn't get that tab in the Excel sheet you sent me.
Sure.
Thank you.
So, you know, it's the same way we set the policy. I think Darrell can talk a little bit about more. We read the new salary classification plan. You know, we set the ranges, but we have a policy basically if people exceed the range, we'll still appropriate actual increases for those individuals. So it doesn't necessarily stop their pay at that level if they're here long enough and do hit the top of that scale. I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit more, Darrell.
It's just a matter of adopting an over the max and compensation circles. They call it a TOP or a TUP, where you allow for an individual that top out. Now, in other environments, what they would do is instead of if an individual, the maximum of a salary grade is, if I take the master's plus 30, the person is at, sorry, I'm following a thread, 88.2. If the person's salary is now 95, if they go up from 88.2 to $90,000, and most companies, what they'll do is just give the person a difference, but still pay them the balance. We didn't know if that would really work. So essentially we just take the difference and divide it up by 26 pays, and we call it what in a system, and on a pay stub, it will show over the max pay. And it's like a supplement basically. So you're still paying the individual that amount. We did not want to take the punitive action of, you know, especially our long-standing employees. If they've been here, they provided that service to the college to get that far into the range, that we're penalizing them at that point and then not increasing their pay. Because some companies do say that you just can't exceed either. And then at that point, if you can't exceed it, you just max out and you're stuck where you are. And then the whole goal behind that, other, especially in private sector, is to push you out of that range. Hey, go and apply for something else that's at a much higher level. And that's the reason for them cutting you off. But then sometimes they're not as punitive and they still provide the TUP payment or what have you once per year. But your pay essentially stays the same. For our guys, we're still doing it. We just adopted it over the max pay, and it shows up as a separate line item, so that their compensation still show the maximum of 88.2, but then the difference between that and the $90,000, we divided up over 26 pays, and they'll still get that on their pay stub separately. So essentially, they're getting paid the more without violating the mid and max of the compensation structure, because the system does track that as well.
Because you want to have room at the top end so that people don't really top out, I think. But I mean, from a HR standpoint or management standpoint, and Terrell, you might talk more about, I mean, your goal really isn't to have everybody at 90 or 100% of the salary schedule at the top. It's more toward the middle and going upward toward the top, but not everybody at the top or maxing out at the top.
Yeah, and I mean, some of that is going to be as we get the appropriate funds from the state, in addition to providing increases, trying to keep pace with the salary schedule as well. So you're constantly adjusting the salary schedule while providing increases. If you just stay pat and don't adjust the salary schedules, then obviously it allows for employees to push through the ranges fairly quickly, depending on how many raises you give in consecutive years. So it's a matter of trying to balance both priorities, basically, not only taking care of our employees, but then also making sure that we do the adjustment upward on a year-to-year basis. And by doing that, you will hope that, obviously the employees would not push through the salary. They'll kind of hover around, the cluster of employees that you have in each level will most likely hover somewhere between the beginning range, between 1% and 50%. And then you might have a few individuals that are long-standing that goes from 50 to 100% penetration. But again, you're just trying to keep pace with the market.
And looking at the other examples we had and what we built the staff on off of other examples and from other colleges that consultants did, they use the same logic where they established amounts like this, where we did here 1.8, 1.8, 1.8. Before you could see the numbers were kind of random. The top to bottom was 1.94 per, 1.83. So again, even when we look at the staff one, it's the same way consistent. Each grade has the same top to bottom span, as a calculation. So, I mean, like I said, this was originally 1.83 from this to that, and now it's basically 1.8. It's still like a healthy range. I don't think we're concerned people will have too many people maxed out at that. And again, we move the salary. Our history has been, we move the salary schedules up at a rate of whatever, half or whatever the raise is, to keep the salary schedule keep moving up and be competitive. That's what we've done in the past. So if you get a 3% raise, then we move the scale up 1.5%. So again, to benefit trying to attract talent from outside also.
Okay, I don't want to take too long and answer some of these other questions, but real quickly, in the administrative summary that was done for the board, there was no mention of administration raises. Are the administration raises included in the staff raise salary or number that's a little bit less than $1 million? And if
Yeah,
not,
that was a straight 5% across the board to everyone. Again, our procedure has always been, if somebody starts in January that year, they get half the amount. And if somebody started before that, they get the full 5. So yeah, that's all administrations, all the staff basically on the salary schedule.
all right.
So Brian, the $1 million included the cost of raising the staff and the administration 5%?
Yes, and that was the full cost, including benefits.
So
pension
by my
plan, so forth.
calculations, if a 5% raise costs $1 million, that means the pool of money that funds the salaries for staff and administration is $20 million. And by my calculations, it's about $7 or $8 million for the pool that pays faculty. And then if you add, I think it was like a couple $1 million for benefits, the personnel costs said $43 million. I'm confused by those numbers.
Well, your personnel costs includes other things too. I mean, you got your adjuncts, your overloads, all the other
Okay.
things also.
All right, that makes more sense.
And
now.
again,
Thank you.
those were increased by, which we'll talk about later. I mean, the adjunct rates were increased.
Okay, I get it
And
now.
again, we want, we need to look at today, the proposal we presented to you before about increasing the overload rates for going forward for the fall.
Okay.
And
Okay,
again, I mean, it's the same logic. I took the pool of money that basically we allocated, toward administration the same way toward faculty, and that's the pool of money we're working with to negotiate and work this out, whatever the best scenario is. Yeah, we can actually increase entry salary rates, or, we can decrease them and use the money and just move the money around within this formula. But as an administration, we think it's fairly important to make sure that the entry rate salary schedules are competitive.
okay, thanks.
Along those same lines of the administrative summary, it noted that quite a bit of money was put into reserves this year. Pretty high amount of money put into reserves. Why was it decided to put it in reserves rather than invest in the faculty and staff?
There was two reserves. One reserve, I think, was a 9% enrollment decline reserve, because we have been declining extremely bad over the last 2 years because of COVID. Two options were either I just project the revenue down, which reduces the amount of expenditure budget you have, or we trying to be optimistic and say we're at least going to break even with last year's enrollment, but be cautious and set aside the reserve in case enrollment does decline. Therefore, we still have the money to pay salaries and pay positions and not eliminate positions. The other one was, don't remember the exact dollar amount, for inflationary increases for next year, because remember this last 2 years we were funded very, very well, but also our enrollment decline, it was over 25%. So that ate up a huge chunk of that new money we got, of allocating it toward that, so that we don't have to worry about when the HERF money's gone. Now we have to reduce expenditures. So we set aside a portion of that for for inflationary increases next year, because our insurance has been increasing 7-8%, and potentially is projected at double digit over the next couple of years. Pension plan has been going up 10% every year. Minimum wage is going up $1 every year, which is almost 10%, which then also leads into the increases for contracted labor, custodial, security, so forth. From the outside, the pressure for them to increase prices, as well as contracts coming due that they continue to have wage increases as well as supply cost increases. So we were trying to be conservative and hold some money aside for that, so that next year, if we don't get a solid appropriation, again, we can dip into that money versus having to look at where are we going to reduce from our current budget.
Okay.
Again, the reserve for the I think it was 9% enrollment decline, if fall goes well, then it gives us some opportunity to reevaluate if we wanted to in the middle of the year, how we're doing. But preliminary right now, from what I'm seeing, it's a little bit difficult, because we are comparing enrollment for the fall for this period now compared to 2 years ago, because last year's data is not good, because we tried to go into the CNS student product, which did not go successful. We had to pull back into the old student system. So we don't have good numbers to compare like days to at this point. So we need to really compare back to 2 years ago. And when I do that and try to manipulate a bit to figure out what that really means compared to now, I was showing we were down about 2 or 3%. So we could possibly still be going down in enrollment. So again, trying to be conservative to make sure. It's always better to be conservative and then say we did better and then have money available for next year.
I appreciate your answer on that. I have one last question. It's 2 parts, and then I'll be finished with all my questions. We know that 20% of the faculty lines are not filled right now. And the 2-part question was, why do you think that is, and what's administration doing about fixing that?
I think there's 32 vacant positions. I think 18 of them were nursing. And as we had talked to you before, and I think we want to approach is we need to provide a stipend amount to high demand areas, which would be, one of them would be nursing. So that's what we really need to have a conversation about, of setting those levels and the union agreeing to those levels so that we can attract those individuals in those high demand areas. I don't know, I mean, Dr. Jeanette and Darrell could add into that also.
Thank you, Brian. Yes, indeed. Just this past week and a half, we hired or made recommendations to hire approximately 9-10 faculty, some in health programs, dental, nursing, and several based on the new positions and the vacancies, retirements or resignations of arts and sciences. So we're continuing to work feverishly to attempt to fill each of those positions. We have no intention of not filling them. To Brian's point, recall we had recommended because of the significant disparity between clinical work and academic work, we would like to continue to review some type of a stipend or some type of a change in the schedule for or the salary for particular positions, notably in nursing and in some IT positions. So that's something that we can continue to talk about in order to recruit high quality talent. But the focus is still on faculty recruitment.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Does anybody else on our team have any questions?
When do you anticipate responding to our other proposals? We had the load calculation, the paid parental leave, the paid faculty mentoring, and the paid COVID training.
We're currently reviewing all of those right now. Again, I'll speak on behalf of the administration and say, going back to the beginning of this meeting, that we definitely apologize for getting the final report to you guys as of late. But as you can imagine, yes, we're in July. We're still doing end of year wrap up from last year. In addition to that, we're still, experiencing challenges within our existing systems, uploading newer salaries, uploading newer benefits, life insurance plans, et cetera, into the system, and also preparing for some other things coming down the pike as well. So because of that, that adds to the delay. And right now, the focus has been to keep the operations going, obviously. And then we obviously have to put dedicate time towards getting at least the salaries done. So we haven't looked at the other models as of yet right now. And I know that when aside from just reviewing what was proposed and then looking at the salary piece and saying the strategy here should be, let's try to get the salary piece done, because that will be the bigger project. And then let's see what we could do to circle back to the other matters. We're trying to take that approach currently. But we could definitely, get back to the wire, once you guys do a review, see where we land in this regard, and then try to have something ready to go for prior to our next meeting.
Okay. And is the administration still considering the load calculation and removing the multipliers for labs and clinicals?
I'll have to defer to Dr. Jeanette on that one.
I think that's under consideration. I think our biggest challenge is that the old student system cannot handle that, and we don't really have anybody to come in to try and see if they could program it to do differently. So unfortunately, it may be a challenge until we get the new system going.
Okay, so I think, that makes sense, because I think that it would change the calculations. But one solution I had thought of, if it's difficult to program into the system, is we don't have thousands of employees. We have 150 roughly faculty, and I calculated it's roughly 70 faculty that are affected by either multipliers or loads that don't add up to 15. So one solution would be just adding a stipend when at the end of the semester or something by hand for the overload above 225 contact hours per semester. So I just want to throw that out there for you guys. So for instance, I teach 16 contact hours a week. I'm paid for 15. Over the semester, I'm not paid for 15 contact hours, 15 weeks, one a contact hour a week. And so it would be great if you just would give 15 times 45 stipends, $600 in December. That might be an easier way of compensating faculty in an equitable way for their time and not having to deal with the complications of the payroll system. So it would just be a hand calculation and a stipend at the end of the semester for anyone over 225.
I think, we can talk about it when we caucus, but I think it wasn't so much an HR problem because we could work our way around that. I think it was more a student system issue with tracking loads and information like that would have to be programmed, and that's not something I think we could probably take on. And again, I think we looked at this study, I think it was a couple of years back, so the numbers are fairly old, but I know back then we looked at it, it was around about $300,000 to kind of right the ship on that whole situation. So that is quite a bit additional money also.
Okay,
Anybody else with any questions? Okay, this is something we're definitely gonna have to caucus, and I can't promise you that there's gonna be anything I can give you an agreement today or a tentative agreement, but we will need some time to caucus in a few minutes. But before we do that, if you would like me to go over the faculty office proposal, I'll do that, Brian.
Yeah, why don't, before you do that, Gary, let me bring up, since we're still on compensation, something that I think Brian or Darrell mentioned. Let me share my screen here, which is this. I will also put on your radar the overload rates. This is the proposal that we made back in April, I believe. And it was kind of tabled to put as part of this broader discussion. So it's the same thing, but I raise it and to hopefully you guys can include that during your discussions in caucus. We're looking at updating the overload rates. And there's a little more urgency to this as well, in that we want to put these into play for the upcoming academic year. And that's the intent to do that, if the union's okay with that. And I don't know that, to the extent that you need to look at salary schedule, and it takes a little more time, obviously, to review that we don't have any problem breaking these down and looking at this separately, if you're okay with that. But have some discussion about that. Let us know where you guys stand on the overload rate so that we can go ahead and implement if possible.
yeah, the only issue there was we were proposing no multipliers for clinicals and labs. So where it says full-time faculty overload, clinical instructor, it's 39.38, which is the 87.5% of $45. So that's why we weren't willing to agree to that, because if we do eliminate multipliers for clinicals, then that would no longer be accurate.
Yeah, and I can speak to what I see happening. And anybody from administration can correct me if I'm out of step here. But I think on the multiplier thing, everybody's looking at studying that. We're hoping to come up with a solution for that. But to be candid with you, it does not appear to me that that's going to happen within the next month or so. And we're likely to have to continue to study that angle for the next year. So to the extent that the holdup on this, and even on some of the salary, is that we want to address that, I'm from, again, a third party perspective, that looks like an area for future work in terms of trying to look at it for maybe next year or whatnot. Not that you can't evaluate it, study it, talk about it now, but the preference is not to hold up these increases to try and solve that problem. And it's one of these things where all of us, I think this salary discussion this morning is a good example that there's no perfect solution given the budget we have and whatnot. There are lots of angles, lots of things that need to be addressed. And part of our negotiation here is trying to figure out how much resources to devote to each of those angles, whether it's compression or, these ratios, whatnot, that we'd like to change. And we're happy to have those discussions, but I don't want to necessarily hold up on getting some of this stuff fixed while we have the resources and time to do it in the hopes of getting that perfect solution. So keep that in mind, and we're interested in your thoughts on that too as well.
I think part of the issue with the multipliers is that there's a concern from the faculty that and I do appreciate you addressing it and talking about it, but how long is that going to go on? We've been kicking this can down the road for several years. And the concern of the faculty is, well, they can just give us lip service and say they're looking at it, they're talking about it. That's a big concern.
Well, we got to remember though, for a couple of years too, when we were reviewing it with you guys and looking into it in more detail, like I said, the bottom line was over 300,000, I think, to implement it. And those were the years when we were looking at it that we were really getting any kind of budget appropriations to do that. So that's why it kind of got kicked down the road a little bit.
Okay.
And again, one thing important to remember too is, I mean, this salary schedule was taken to the board, and the board approved the non-instructional rate as it's listed there, as well as the part-time faculty rate. So those are the rates non-instructional staff and part-time faculty will get paid for the fall. The rates that are listed there. But again, we're waiting for your approval from the union to provide the overhead rates you indicated for the fall. And it really be a case, I think, where we really got to decide and have an agreement going in, because it's not like we want to issue contracts and then, 3 weeks into the contracts, be reissuing amended contracts.
I understand the time constraint, but we're not going to just take a deal to do a deal. So I have to make sure that the faculty is okay with whatever we agree to.
Mhm.
So just want to be upfront about that, is that, we feel that we're going to find the best we can go. And we're not just going to agree to something because there's a time constraint that we need to agree to it.
And again, remember though, all the rates are, as proposed, are all going up significantly. So
I understand that. I understand. And I'll bring it to the caucus.
All right, Gary, I'm gonna, can you share, or do you want me to share your proposal
I
on?
think I can share. Let me try putting it up here. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Pretty straightforward proposal. I'll just read it real quickly. Office hours will be established at times to ensure optimal availability and accessibility by faculty to their students. The regular schedule of office hours shall be made available in writing faculty members, students, and supervising administrator on the first day of class, with the right to amend the regular schedule of office hours until the end of the first week of classes. Deviation in regular schedule shall be approved in advance by the faculty member supervisor and shall therefore be known to the faculty member students as soon as practical. In-person office hours may be conducted in the faculty member's assigned office, classroom, and or available public location in the faculty member's campus. Faculty member in programs that offer face-to-face classes are expected to schedule at least 10 hours per week for office hours, with a minimum of 5 hours on campus, the remainder being done remotely or virtually. And I think the one thing that we changed a little bit is the faculty who teach in programs that are offered fully online may choose to hold 10 office hours virtually. Faculty must attend all on-campus meetings, of course, unless excused by the college president. And the faculty must be able to meet on campus at the request of a student or administrator with a 48-hour notice. So I entertain any questions you may have.
I guess my only question, I was trying to look back at what we had TA'd the article from the original union contract. I know it's not been ratified, what the differences are, or maybe the differences between this proposal versus what's currently occurring. Is it just that the fully online?
I think the modification is the fully online.
Yeah, that's the only difference.
Okay. We haven't had a chance to discuss that, but we can discuss the proposal during caucus. Any questions from administration side to the union as to the office hours proposal? Okay.
So just to provide a little justification, I've spoken with faculty that are fully online, such as the Bachelor's of Business Administration and Bachelor's of Science in Nursing. And they are available on campus 5 hours a week, but these students are fully online. Many of them are out of state. They've gotten 0 since COVID, and sometimes occasionally ones other than that requests for face-to-face office hours. So I understand that the faculty should absolutely be available for students, but it doesn't really make sense in terms of environmentally friendly, gas prices, for faculty to drive to campus to sit in an office with no students when they could just as well be using that time the same way at home. The 48 hours notice is basically to make sure that the faculty are available for students at their request or administration's request. It would also, if you feel uncomfortable having faculty working out of state or out of the country, that would ensure that they're at least close to campus, but it would not require them making an unnecessary drive. And they would still be available for students just at request, and they would have the same office hours online.
Okay, I think that's helpful. We'll talk about it during caucus. I don't think there's anything else we have to propose at the moment, unless there's something else from the union. I think now would be a good time to caucus.
No, we don't have anything else, Brian. Can we at least have about 45 minutes? We got a lot to talk about. We may need a little more time. I'll get with you and let you know via email if we need more time, but can we do 10:45 for right now?
Yeah, that'll be fine. Why don't we plan on 45 minutes? Email us. And if you need more time, might be beneficial to email Pam Nadolski as well, since she's controlling the meeting here. So let's do that. Administration, let's move into the caucus room.
And faculty, we're going to go to our caucus room that we had this morning.